Philip, I don't know if you knew this, but I went to an anarchist university. I had to drop out, though. There were no classes.
Oh, I was like, where is this going? I can't that honestly, in retrospect, it's I'm a little bit disappointed in myself that I didn't see that coming. Um, but still good. Still got me. So,
I have to enjoy that in my journey to find this one. Um, I went to Reddit and I was looking up anarchist puns, and I found a Reddit thread of what's your favorite anarchist joke, and then because Reddit has to bump you some type of ad in order for them to make money, I get need working capital? We can help. Apply now at www.getworkingcapital.net.
oh man, someone's AdSense is really off right there.
But on to the topic. So we are continuing our discussion about. I'm Tom. This is Philip. This is Raise 'em Left. I don't think we introduced the last episode, and I almost
Oh,
didn't
we got
introduce
too
this
eager.
episode.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
we got too spicy about parental leave too quick, and we're about to get there again.
This is a
So
professional production, y'all. We are long time podcasters with, you know, lots of experience and no production mistakes here, okay?
professionalism is a myth.
Yeah, it is. That's also true.
So last episode we talked about what is maternity leave, what is paternity leave, what is the state of paternity leave and maternity leave in the United States on a federal level, and what's the state of it on the state level. We ended giving a horrible story about the current governor of Missouri. Well, not current, former governor of Missouri. Um, so now let's well, actually, before we get there, the last element that I didn't mention about Missouri was that 31% of uh, Missouri workers, only 31% are offered any form of paid parental leave. So that's great. Just 31% have any form of paid parental leave.
I was kind of surprised about that because I mean, like, it sort of was a little bit of a spotlight on my own like personal privilege in that, like, as a software developer, every job that I've had that wasn't like either like some easy college job or like like retail minimum wage type stuff has had some amount of paid parental leave as part of its benefits package. Um, so like my individual perception was that, like, okay, yeah, like obviously like wage labor sucks and they don't give them any kind of benefits. Uh, and like college jobs are what they are. They're just, to get some uh, to add a little extra income to your, living off of your student loans, which is its own can of worms. But I didn't realize that the percentage of this was so low because every employer that I've worked for offers it. Um, but software developers are not the group of workers that are um, currently struggling the most under capitalism, I'll say.
Yeah, and I mean, I think an element of this is a very that you bring up a very important framework and thing I think to dive through and discuss for a lot of folks. For even myself, even though I grew up within this framework, it's still something that is very easy to move past and forget. And yeah, we start to build this framework of what is normal and what is average based on our experience. And one of the things that I like to remind folks is that, well, a lot of first of all, a lot of the jobs we think of as high school, think of as college jobs, are not generally performed by high school or college kids. In a college town, a lot of times they are. Like all of the fast food restaurants around a university in a college town are usually performed by college students. But as soon as you leave college towns, that's not the case anymore. One of the things that I specifically like to remind folks is to actually go around the streets in your neighborhood and just notice how many retail and fast food establishments there are. Think about the number of people that have to work in each one. When you look at like every McDonald's and you think about the fact that every single shift is going to have, 15 to 20 people maybe on shift. That's a little bit of a high estimate. I'm thinking of some bigger McDonald's as I worked on one right off the interstate. But still, like, you're there's 30 or 40 people on staff at that one restaurant. Okay, there's four restaurants on that corner, six more down the street, another six more on the other side of the street, four more on the next corner, and this is a town of only 1,000 people. Like, how many people are working in these McDonald's, or I mean, in these restaurants? And now we're gonna look at the retail that is in all of these strip malls. And then from there you get into call centers, and so like really the vast majority of our workforce is very carefully out of view of a lot of professional class people, and I count myself into this now. Like, this is one of those things I have to like aggressively kind of remind myself of sometimes. This, like, the kind of a where I came from thing, the thing that made me angry in the beginning. um because it's very actively, intentionally kind of, slipped outside of our view. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people can get like really mad easily when people start talking about how like fast food workers deserve $15 an hour. And they'll be like, well, these are just high school kids. They're just working while they're in high school. Yet not realizing that, like, specifically, like, I'll hear this from really old people who, in my experience working in McDonald's, like, McDonald's in the morning is full of people over 60. And they will all sit there and complain about it's just high school kids that work at McDonald's and these kids can't get my order right. But it's Tuesday at 10 a.m. Who do they think is working?
Yeah.
And this is just like a new word that I can't stop using even when I'm using it wrong. This is a whole dialectic that exists that is really hard to work through, and is really persistent. Like I said, it works its way into some of my frame of thinking. Um, I still like it's a thing that like I go back to fast food restaurants and like don't recognize staff there or do recognize staff there, either or, and be like, ah, man, like we did this job when I was in high school and you're still here. Well, no, it's not just a high school kid job. It is a job that traps people and also actively preys on people to make them stay in them. But I'm running away from the topic of this podcast. But I'm just saying, you're very valid in recognizing that. And yeah, it's like hidden labor is all around us.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think when we ended the last one, it was kind of mostly going over, what the current state of everything was, and the too long didn't watch, didn't listen of that is, it sucks. It's real bad. Uh, Basically, only lucky people that are, in the sort of like professional class of people are lucky enough to have even the minutest crumb of paid leave. And if you are the lucky, slightly, barely over half of other working families, you might qualify for unpaid leave, which is basically worthless. I suppose it is in some arguable way better than nothing, but not by much. And we talked a lot about that. But this episode, we're focusing on the sort of future thinking of where to go from here. What do other countries have that we can look at as a model? What is the recommendations from the medical profession on like what people should have in an ideal world? And then importantly, what can you do to advocate for, fight for, organize for, to help with this particular issue? So, Tommy, what do other countries have?
Not as much as we often think they do. So this is something that I think, again, all of us kind of fall into this like hegemonic kind of a thought and presumption of like, God, I wish I lived anywhere, everywhere other than the US gets wonderful like maternity and paternity leave. And they do, as a general rule, most other countries do have way better leave than us, but it's not perfect. by a long shot. So it's one of these things that like with most things, I kind of like it's smart to look at what other people are doing and kind of come up with your own idea based off of that. But I'm definitely not an advocate of like copy and paste what everyone else is doing.
Oh, sure, yeah. It always has to be in the cultural and historical context of your, actual country.
Yeah, and
Um,
yeah, and especially like as some blend of anarchist, I there's a lot of what other countries do that I have problems with because they're states exerting power over people, and I don't like it. Um, but 120 or more than 120 other countries have a form of paid parental leave. Usually, almost entirely in what I was finding in research, that's for women. It's almost exclusively maternity leave. Very little paternity leave that you find around the globe. It's really a rarity. It often comes with a lot of really onerous exemptions and complicated rules. I was stumbling into a lot of I was finding like countries where you're allowed X number of pregnancies within your lifetime. You're allowed certain amount of uh, uh, leave per year. You're allowed like limitations that would be put on you. Like basically, if you miscarried, you would be in some way punished through
oh,
uh, parental leave stuff. Just a lot of things that I don't like. And a lot of times seeing it coupled with, again, with sick leave. It would be, yeah, no, you have any form of illness in your family, you have this leave, which of course, also like in a problem with this when we talk about even with FMLA is, this is like with FMLA, it's often leave that if your kids go through a thing, so if your kids have one of your kids has a major medical ailment that year and you have a baby that year, you can't do both. And just you see that tied
yeah.
together in a
Look,
lot of
just
other.
when you're planning out your kids' sicknesses, make sure not to put them in the same year that you have a baby. A thing that you also can 100% of the time always plan for. It never happens. Um, because without you wanting it to, because we have complete and full access to birth control at all times. So um, I don't see why that's unreasonable, unless any of the things I said weren't true. In which case, oh my god,
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and I mean, and explicitly, like, one of the things that really bugged me is I ran into it a couple of times is number of maternity leaves you can take within a lifetime, which was usually 3 to 2, 2 to 3, I guess, in the correct way of framing that. Which is just ew to me. Like, that gets real. It's one of these things that, like, as somebody who I studied in China for a long time, and one of the things going to China, I heard a lot of bad mouthing of China before I went and when I came back, especially from people talking about the one child policy in China, which I definitely did not agree with. But at the same time, a lot of people disagreed with it in like a way stronger tone than they should have, seen as how they don't live in China. Like, it's another country and let it do its thing, and explicitly from a very Western centric tone. It was, they're weaponizing it as a like, Eastern countries do weird things like this, and finding a lot of Western countries saying, well, you can only take 2 maternity leaves in your lifetime, and I'm like, well, that's real close to a 2 child policy. Like, if you cannot take a maternity leave, like if you are legally like, no, you are not allowed to take a leave for a pregnancy, that's real close to a 2 child policy.
yeah, but it has an important exception into it, along with most other laws, which is that if you have lots of money, it doesn't apply to you. So cool. It's
Exactly. And
it's 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 what I heard it once and it's stuck in my brain ever since. It's that if the penalty or the thing that you need to get around a law is a fine or a cost, it's not a crime for rich people.
yeah, and I think that's, I think it's worthwhile getting into that as like a thing of, when we talked at the end of last episode, well, nobody opposes this. Why would anybody oppose this? And I think, again, that kind of comes from a bubbled worldview, maybe. I live within a bubbled worldview of generally poor and working class people, more professional, growing number of professional class people as I enter that sphere. Very few managerial class people or what's corporate class people or owning class people. Like I just don't rub shoulders with them, and those are the people making these rules, and it is very understandable, not allowable, not ethical, not moral, not acceptable, but understandable to see them have the view that maternity leave prevents parents of lesser means from having children. So it's like the lack of maternity leave prevents parents of lesser means from having children. So a lack of maternity leave being a good thing. This is a
Yeah.
thing you see really common in American culture. I mean, like the movie Idiocracy.
Idiocracy. Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. These are the people that go around being like, Idiocracy is a documentary. Like that's that's the real society's problem. It's like, hey, cool. I'm glad you found eugenics under a different name, and that you're for it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's that going on. I 100% believe that that's a thing being discussed among those folks, just by reason of what their own what benefits them, right? And so yeah, that's frustrating, and I think that's an element of all of this. But fuck what those people think. What do medical professionals think? What do doctors
Yeah.
think? um, because this is something that is again, like, oh boy, do doctors have some strong opinions on this for obvious reasons. So we see a 51% reduction of rehospitalization among women who have paid leave after birth. This very explicitly explains and predicts why we see such higher birth mortality rates among Black women and other women of color. As when we look at you know uh, wealth inequalities, racial wealth inequalities in America.
And
Uh,
importantly, I want to emphasize paid leave.
Yeah, yes, paid leave is, and this was something that they did look at this with unpaid leave and paid leave, and they did not like it. You don't see the improvement with unpaid leave for obvious reasons, but you do see the improvement with paid leave, and I think I get into that. I think there's another country here where they shift to from unpaid leave to paid leave. Um, the first country I have where I discuss this is Norway. So Norway went from 12 weeks paid leave to 16 weeks paid leave, which from massively more than us to even more massively more than us. They found findings among post partum, right?
Pardon. Yeah.
Postpartum women of better blood pressure levels, better pain levels, and more full returns to physical fitness. So, in other words, they recovered better. Which in this one was important to me because when you're thinking about like the recovery from a major life event, from a major trauma, right? Physical trauma. You're recovering from physical trauma, and you're measuring, that's 4 weeks, right? 13, 14. Yeah, you're measuring a 4 week difference 12 weeks out. And we're sitting here saying, whoa, 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 12 weeks out? No, 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 no. You need 6 of those, half of that. It's just, I
And
don't know.
the improvements continue 4 weeks out. Yeah.
Yeah, like to
4 weeks
me,
out of 12. Yeah. Into 16. Yeah.
it shows, it illustrates the absolute absurdity of American maternity leave. Like, if you
Well,
were,
because of course, you like you said last episode, it's a major abdominal surgery if you have a C-section, and even if you don't, like it's usually not without some degree of injury, or at the very minimum, if you have a very comfortable pregnancy and a very comfortable delivery process, stressful on the body to understate it, right? Like, what do people tell you when you have a major medical procedure done and you're done with it and now you need to go home and recover? They say, get lots of rest. Make sure it's always in the advice. No matter what procedure, no matter what it is, it always contains get lots of rest. Good luck with an infant in your house. 0% chance of happening.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're like, I can't believe it takes people 16 weeks to like recover. That's insane. And you're like, yeah, because they had a major medical procedure and then they weren't able to get in the arrest because there's a thing screaming at them all the time. Give them some time.
And then
Nature's not gonna change. You're not gonna get babies to stop crying, so you need to give them the time.
and then capitalism is just like, well, we just need to stop doing all that then. And then you wonder why the
You want
fucking
us to
birth
pay
rates
people to
drop.
exist?
Then you wonder why the birth rate drops. Why aren't these kids in at work?
Yeah.
Uh, so then additionally, so that's physical, improvements. Well, we also see rates of depression significantly greater among people who return to work less than 2 months after giving birth. So that
Yeah, that
is,
one hits hard for me
yeah,
because
like,
that was I did that and then that was around the time that I got diagnosed for it. Although I later learned that it was probably a mix of that and ADHD. So it's complicated in my case, but not surprising. I feel that one.
mm-hmm. Yeah, we see way higher rates of postpartum depression in countries without full maternity leave, with less than 8 weeks of maternity leave. Um, we have multiple. As I talked about this last podcast, I have an episode that I'm writing for us to do in the future, actually talking about skin to skin contact, the importance of skin to skin contact, the importance of men engaging with skin to skin contact with babies. Um, there is just a plethora, a mountain of medical evidence showing that skin to skin contact is absolutely necessary for the health of newborns, for the mental health and the recovery of parents. It's just good and better. And it's one of those things that, like, and I want to be very clear here, it's not something that medical science just now discovered. Like, this is a thing that people, women and people who raise children have generally known across human history, but medical science and people in charge of telling people other things have ignored them. Like, that's a whole thing that I'm going to get into real deep in some future episodes. When it comes to childcare, there's a lot of people who have known a lot about childcare, and the greater patriarchal milieu has actively ignored them and actively called them child abusers and actively marginalized them.
Yeah, there's a lot of attention that's in the history of science. There's a lot of attention that's been paid to the debunked and garbage science that made up like a lot of the like, racial science stuff that was going on. Um, I think people walk away with that with the impression that like, oh, okay, science is pretty good, and like, don't get me wrong, epistemologically, I'm a big fan of science. Okay, so like, don't come at me. I'm not anti-science or whatever, but like the institution of science, right, has had some real black marks. And the people hear the racial one and I think they get the impression that it's like this is the big black mark on science, but like mostly it's been good. And no, this like the institution of science has always been a vehicle by which the in power class exerts its will and influence. Even back before capitalism, like the churches were dictating what kinds of science and scientific progress could be, you know, put out and what kind of were funding certain things, and that had continued. Like it, of course, like you say, it took medical science forever to catch up. Of course it did, because like the people who are paying for the science, because science isn't free, are not gonna hear, hey, you should profit less and give people more care and time and freedom. uh, they're gonna say, hey, go back and do that experiment again and give me a different result.
Yeah, and so where we're at now in science is that we see multiple medical studies that show an increase in bonding, connectivity, health, all of that, but for the newborn and parents. And we see children of parents who remain home for more than 2 months show greater cognitive development and higher functioning at younger ages. Almost every single milestone and marker, cognitive marker, developmental marker is hit more accurately, more consistently, and at a higher degree if the parents stay home longer than 2 months. And we're not even measuring anything more than 2 months. We are using, in America, we're using 8 weeks as like the holy shit, this person got a lot of maternity leave. And now I want to rewind and talk about how Norway said, well, what if we looked at 16 weeks and said, holy shit, we found a lot of improvement from 16 weeks or to 16 weeks from 12 weeks.
Literally twice the amount that the US is like, oh man, that would be like so much maternity leave. Like you basically be swimming in it.
I mean, this is very much like as you, if in America, when you broke your leg, you were expected to go to work like 2 days later. And
So, you
then
know, America.
yes. And then doctors were like, "Hey, we saw in America that if you go to work 4 days after you break your leg, it'll be quite a bit more healed." And if a doctor on the other side of the world was like, "Yeah, bro, if you spend 6 weeks off that leg, it's going to be completely healed." And American doctors were just like, I mean, come on, 4 days was a lot. You expect
Yeah.
us to go more than that? And now, and I'm not throwing
Who's gonna
doc
pay for that?
and I'm not throwing doctors under the bus here. Well, to some degree I am, because again, as we just talked about, like the structure of science in America, like there is something very valuable to talk about here where when you're looking at the medical advice coming out of the United States, it is very much flavored by the hegemonic view of what is possible, right? So people aren't going to do research on something that is an impossible, like, okay, well, what if we gave people 5 years of maternity leave? Like nobody's going to do that study globally. Nobody's going to do that study because that doesn't seem hegemonically possible, right? Um, so that's the first problem, and then the second problem is, as you pointed out, the like all of this exists within a system of capitalism, um, and medical insurance companies have a huge hand in medical research, and just nobody's going to fund studies that show, hey, capitalism's doing a bad one. We need to do better. So all of this is flavored by that. I'm not throwing doctors under the bus, but I am throwing the system of a lot of medical science in the US has definitely deserved some criticism here when we're looking at other countries studying this and they're looking at massive time spans longer than we are and we're seeing advancement and we're not even looking at the frames they are. That's a problem to me. So what do we do about all this, right? Oh, whoa, whoa, no, 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 no. Hold on. Before we go any further, actually, I forgot a bit of my notes. Increases in paid maternity leave show a significant decrease in post neonatal infant and child mortality rates. So, we've talked about the health of the parents, we've talked about the development of the parents. Let's just talk about the babies surviving. So, if parents get more maternity leave, the babies have a way higher chance of a significant, I shouldn't say way higher, a significantly higher chance in survival. Now, there is a difference there between way higher and significant. Significant just means it has a p-value of not p point zero
Yeah, it's
five. God, it's been too long.
95% likely to be, yeah.
Yes, too long since I took stats classes. But uh, drops in these rates were demonstrated in that after the passage of FMLA in 1993, but only among college educated married cis straight women. So, what I'm saying here is they looked at these rates in women before the passage of FMLA in 1993, and then after. And afterwards, they saw an increase, or sorry, a decrease in neonatal, infant, and child mortality rates. So, less babies die after the passage of FMLA if their mothers are college educated, married, cis, and straight.
Which, you know, pretty much goes along with what we were saying last time, which is that like what's the group of people that are going to be able to take advantage of FMLA in the first place? It's people that can afford to take unpaid leave, which is gonna be that group of people. Uh,
Yes.
because
And
if they're married and straight, right, they're married to a man in the majority of cases, probably, you know, uh, also a college educate, like just statistically, college educated people tend to marry each other. They often meet in college. Um, so like this is not terribly surprising from just the economic side of things.
Yeah. And so the last note here is that the American Academy of Pediatrics has publicly called for Congress to pass legislation requiring 12 weeks of paid leave for both parents, which isn't bad. Like, that's pretty cool. That's good. That's what the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends, which is kind of where we've ended at this episode. Like, of man, if you were going to talk about a base minimum, that 12 weeks seems pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
And
what can,
it's that's American doctors,
yeah.
like this is not a bunch of uh, you know, crazy liberal, leftists in Europe or whatever. This is like the most well respected pediatric institution in the United States. So
Yeah, made up of people whose futures rely on the fact of them being shareholders because they probably have IRA Roth plans and that's how they're going to retire because there are no pensions in the medical industry. Who golf and hang out with business owners and people in the owning class. Their best, like their what they landed on is what a lot of people would call radical socialism.
yeah. So
Um,
speaking of radical socialism,
yeah, what can you do? What can you do? Speaking of radical socialism, uh,
yeah. So there's, I mean, obviously, there's the general like get involved, but like let's be more specific, right? Um, there are often uh, organizations locally that you can join that will be campaigning for laws about parental leave, often among other things, depending on the scope of the organization. So definitely look for local organizations in your area to get involved with. These grassroots organizations um, are generally just like I mean, I'm biased because I started one, but like I think that they're generally a blast to be in. Uh, and uh, often I've found that like some of the greatest people that I've met through getting involved with local organizations that are doing grassroots efforts to campaign for changes. So definitely do that. Um, Obviously, in a more direct sense, if you are working somewhere and statistically you are, uh, then and your place is not unionized, and again, statistically it isn't, uh, unionize it. Obviously, you're not going to do that in a week, or well, maybe you did if you left a comment, but
if you do,
uh,
please tell us. Please tell us
that would be
your wizard
amazing.
secrets.
Yeah, I want to know what spell you cast, what deal you made with a demon. Uh, but uh, you know, uh, research, learn. There's some great books and resources out there to learn how to organize. Currently, our labor reading group in Red Dirt Collective is in the middle of reading No Shortcuts, Organizing for Power by Jane McElvey. I hope I'm saying that right. It's a great book, fantastic of like good practical advice on how to, along with some historical existing examples to do so on how to do that in an effective way. So, start talking to employees. You think you might be surprised how many of them have shared complaints about the way that things are run, and probably have shared complaints about parental leave and how they don't have any. And so you could join a union, and if you succeed at that and get your union and get to negotiate, you can negotiate for good parental leave. You probably won't get 12 weeks, but you might get 4 to 6 if you're good at your negotiation. So um, you can always do that.
Yeah, and discuss parental leave openly and freely with those coworkers, obviously, as you just said, but also with just everybody else. Like, just talk about this shit. Like, this is very much like not talking about your wages. not talking the general American milieu of like, oh, don't talk about politics, don't talk about, at the dinner table we don't talk about politics, religion, or whatever the other one is. do do that thing, talk about it. Politics are what directly relate to us in our day-to-day lives. Politics involve the things that actively uh, engage within the systems of power around us, and it's all of this stuff. It is maternity leave. Whether or not you're able to spend zero time with your newborn child or 12 weeks of time with your newborn child, that is politics. Talk about it with other people. Get fiery with other people, have these discussions, have these conversations, pull other people into it with you. Get annoyed about a thing as a group, get some catharsis off of it, talk about it. Don't have judgment over, don't judge people because like a part of this too is the social element of when you start talking about wanting parental leave, wanting paternal leave, wanting maternity leave. There's this kind of thing of like, oh, you just want time off, you just want to not be at work. Anybody who has had a child knows that that shit is not time off of work. It is a whole other work that you are doing. um
Yeah, I've never
so
felt less ready to go back to work after 2 weeks of time off uh, in my parental leave. So
yeah,
yeah. And
def
honestly, like, just throw that away for a second. Yeah, I want time off of work. Work sucks. Fuck work. Like obviously, like, we got to do some amount of work as a people, tyranny of nature and all that. But like, come on, like, don't don't like seriously look at me. Like, anyone who says that to you, look at them and be like, tell me right now that you don't want more time off work. And if they say that they actually don't want more, they wish they could go to work more, like, either uh call them a liar, tell them to get therapy, or ask them how the boot tastes.
yes. And lastly, listen to women on this subject. We sound maybe, hopefully, kind of like we're real smart and educated on these two episodes, but we're not. Like, I had to do so much research. I have learned so many things during my wife's pregnancy. Um, I don't know shit. Listen to women on this subject. I had some hesitancy in wanting to talk about a lot of this kind of stuff, but because like, well, I don't know, maybe I'm not the right person to talk about, these elements. But if it gets you to go out there and listen to women talk about this, if I'm able to hopefully get some of speaking to men, if I'm able to get some of y'all to actually engage with these things that you maybe think don't directly relate to you, then cool. That's why I'm fucking here, and that's why I want to talk to you. That's why I want you to listen. Like, go listen to women on these subjects. Go learn what pregnancy is like as best you can.
Yeah,
Um,
the real version,
mm-hmm.
because it's not the romantic version that you see in movies.
Yeah. But we've almost ran out of time with you. So now that we've told you to go listen to somebody else, where could they still listen to us?
Yeah. As always, if you liked this episode and you want to see more like it, if you're watching on YouTube, like the video, leave a comment, and hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any future episodes. If you really like this episode or really like this podcast and want to support it so that we can keep making more episodes, you can go to patreon.com/raisemleft. And if you just want to see what we're up to and engage with us in between episodes, you can find us on social media. We have a Facebook page, and we're working on getting a TikTok and some other things up. So be looking for that in the future.